let's shift now into the body.
Yeah.
Covered the brain. And I'm really curious about some of the information or misunderstandings around cholesterol, which you mentioned earlier, good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. How's that playing out? How's our knowledge of that evolved?
Wow, this one, seems to change or be challenged every 10 years.
Okay.
So I'm going to back you up. And so people who listen to your podcast can get really upset when I say this name, Ansel Keys.
Okay.
Okay, so Ansel Keys goes to the Mediterranean and starts studying risk factors for heart disease, and makes these graphs. And I think he's misquoted in this a lot, because what I see Ansel Keys discovering is saying, wait a second, there's not a good relationship between fat and heart disease. He's struggling to draw this relationship. And what he realizes is that, hey, saturated fats correlate pretty good in his hands, but the monosaturated fats don't correlate. And he's got a beautiful figure, if people can dig it up, where he sees Crete, a little island in Greece, that has the highest fat intake but the lowest heart disease. And he's like, this makes no sense. And then he realizes that Crete, they're consuming olive oil. And that's his to me, that's his eureka moment, that fats are not fats, they're not fats. And it's beautiful because he spells Crete with a K in the figure. It's just really nice, right? Then we fast forward, and fats, I wasn't there, saturated fats become bad, and people realize that they they raise this LDL cholesterol, right? So if you eat a lot of saturated fats, raises your LDL cholesterol, not good. The statins come on as a means to lower LDL cholesterol. They lower heart disease risk, and we go on and go on. And it seems pretty simple. I was in school in the 90s. I got this, no problems, right? Yeah. Then a couple weird things happen. The epidemiologists start studying things like dairy, which are high in saturated fats, but people who consume dairy have lower heart disease. And it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, right? It's not fitting the model. And they keep reproducing that. So there are ideas around that. One thing people sometimes forget, when you eat something, you don't eat something else, right? So maybe people consuming dairy aren't consuming soft drinks. I don't know that to be true, but things get a little tricky that way. And then, the other thing is these polyunsaturates tend to lower that LDL cholesterol. And so we're all excited about this. And then a friend of mine, and I don't think he minds me saying this, ruins it all for us, because he goes and finds some old studies that weren't published where they tried to test this hypothesis with omega-6s versus saturates, with the idea is we give you more omega-6s, less saturates will lower your heart disease risk. These studies weren't published. The guy plays some sort of, not MacGyver, but the detective kind of thing, finds the old studies, digs them up, reanalyzes them, and they didn't work. Oh. And so we're like, oh, what's going on here, right? And I don't know the answer to this question. I think we're still advancing on this, and some people are quite confident in it, but I'm not too confident either way. These saturated fats raise the bad cholesterol. I think that's not a good thing for public health. The polyunsaturates lower that cholesterol, which is probably a good thing. They're probably doing some other things too, inflammation, blood pressure. And we don't have a definitive study showing the answer one way or another. And we're trying to guess the answer with somewhat incomplete data. And it might be complicated, because if you eat one source of saturated fats, that might be bad. But if you take in things like yogurt or milk, it might displace things that are worse or more bad, and it might be good for you. And we're stuck, right? We're stuck without the definitive randomized controlled trial, and we're trying to piece this together on incomplete data sets and biomarkers and correlational data. My best take is too much saturated fat, not a good thing. Replacing with the poly is probably a good thing. Where the line is, what the food source is, what you're displacing with, all matter. Sorry, I probably didn't help you too much there. But
no, actually, you totally did, because the context, the historical context in this question is really, really important, because we have this narrative that it was bad and that it causes cholesterol. Then all of a sudden we have this narrative now that fats are good for you, but it's actually a nuanced answer. It isn't super definitive, and there are some is good to some extent, some is good to some extent. It's actually a mixed model almost.
But you can imagine if I wanted to do a randomized controlled trial on this, right? And I want to test whether saturated fats from dairy are in fact not an issue for heart disease. Okay, so I would take half the people and I'd give them some cheese, maybe some butter, and some milk. Okay, what do I give the control group? This is the issue in nutritional studies, right? What do I give the control group? And somebody might say, well, you should give them vegetable oils. Fine. But should I give them olive oil, or should I give them the seed oils, or should I give them some fish, or so the control group almost becomes more important than the treatment group, and it makes these nutritional studies really hard to do, right? And we lack that data, and it's really interesting in social media. I find where we lack data, opinions even get stronger
Yeah.
sometimes as opposed to weaker, right?
Like the seed oil craziness that's on social media right now is kind
Yeah,
of mind blowing. Anyway,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I get random emails from people who claim they don't get sunburns because they stop consuming seed oils, right? And that's interesting. That should be testable, right? We should be able to actually test that. I'm not aware if anybody's done it. I'm pretty skeptical that you can stop eating seed oils and go stand in the sun all day and not get a sunburn,
Right.
but people write this to you. The thing I'll say that's clearly, though, about the seed oils is if they're as bad as people say they are, we should see bodies in the epidemiology. What do I mean by that? Is people who've tried whichever way, whether they're asking people what they eat or trying to measure it some other way. If these things were truly toxic, we should see the bodies starting to pile up in the studies. And people are always like, "Oh, we're unhealthy," but our longevity is improving, right?
Yeah.
If you look at it, we had that little dip in COVID, but it's going up slowly over the past 50 years. So it's hard to believe as we've lowered saturated fat, increased longevity, that we got it backwards and something else was to blame. So
I appreciate that context and settling everything down. All right, let's get super practical just to close things out. If you had some clear, simple recommendations, how can people put some of this into practice in their lives? What are some of your recommendations for people to think about adopting?
yeah, so I think that the simple thing with fats and nutrition is to not make it too complex. And I really like these movements going forward that are food first and kind of unprocessed food. That's another important nuance, right? Sometimes, for whatever reason, certain processed foods like to add certain types of fats in them. And so now we're struggling with, is it the processed foods bad, or is it the fat that's bad, or is it because the fat's in a processed food that's bad? And that was supposed to be a confusing sentence because it is confusing.
Yeah,
Right? So I think if people step back and take a whole food approach, and enjoy your fish, you want to consume some olive oil, knock yourself out, and stick with those approaches. That'll be that'll get you a long ways there, right? And then there's some people who are going to want to optimize this, and some people say, well, I don't like fish, what should I do? And they're all special cases that we should be aware of. But you're going to get 90% of the way there if you stick to whole food sources, and frankly don't consume too much of it.
got it. What about grass-fed versus grain-fed? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I think it's a neat thing, right? So the idea is that grass has more omega-3s in it than grains in general. And then the animals that consume that will reflect that a little bit. And it shows up a little bit in beef. But beef have a rumen and they're tough on omega-3s. So you don't get beef with a lot of omega-3s. But if you do that in a chicken, you can actually get a chicken with a fair amount of omega-3s into it. So it can start to make a difference. Now, eating a ribeye on Friday night once a month at the price of beef, I don't know that it matters, right?
Right.
And so that's one thing. But things like chicken, which are commonly consumed, I can draw out a calculation on a napkin saying, well, it'd be this much or more omega-3s, and I could correlate that with the health effect. Nobody's ever tested this, right? So we don't have any trials doing it. But I think it can add up in the context of a whole diet. Again, that's maybe a little bit of the icing on the top. Just eating the whole foods is probably a good start as opposed to the processed ones. And then, if you have the ability to get some of these grass-fed things, which is not so easy to do all the
Yeah.
time, right? And these free living animals, which can be can be, not always, better ethically sourced. It's a reasonable thing to add on a little bit on the top. Probably a good approach.
If you have your blood work done and you have low omega-3s, would you take a supplement or would you just go the whole food route?
So this is fascinating, okay? And I'm going to throw a big catch at you at this. The population with the lowest omega-3s, and I don't know if you are one of these, are vegans and vegetarians. Because the omega-3s they're measuring are EPA and DHA in almost all of these measurements. They call it the omega-3 index, usually.
Yeah.
It doesn't include that plant ALA one. And so they show up as really, really low on that. And you can correlate the omega-3 index inversely with health really well. So the higher levels, lower heart disease, lower other things. Correlation is really nice. It's not causation. The exception are these vegans and vegetarians who also have low incidences of the same diseases that the omega-3 index correlates with. So they don't fit the curve well, right? So we haven't studied them a lot, but they don't fit the curve well. I'm dancing around your question. What would I do? So I think that fish is really neat from a nutritional perspective, because if you have a piece of salmon tonight or a piece of tuna, it changes what's on your plate. Okay. So I show this to my class. I show a piece of sashimi tuna. It's really beautiful. And I put some junk food around it and the plate just looks funny.
Yeah.
But if you show the sashimi tuna with a nice salad, a couple slices of tomatoes, maybe a glass of white wine, a little bit of lemon, it's like, ooh, that plate looks like it makes sense. Okay. And so it's changing the nature of the nutrition around you. And worse than that, it's displacing something. So you're having the salmon tonight, you're not having some sort of burger with French fries. You know, if you told me you were pairing sashimi, I'm having a hard time saying that all of a sudden we're on this podcast, tuna, with a soft drink, I would walk off this podcast. I'd say that's inappropriate. You can't do that. That's insulting to like generations of people. And where am I going with this? Like, it displaces the meal that you're not having, and it changes the context of the meal you're having. So I think that's a better tool. Okay. So I like that approach more than saying, well, you want to get your omega-3 index up, take some fish oil supplements, knock yourself out. But just don't use that as an excuse to change what's on the plate for worse.
Yeah,
kind of
got
approach.
it.
So it comes with that balance.
I love fish, so that's going to be fine. I do trend towards plant-based. That's probably why. So I appreciate the personal Greg Wells coaching at the end of this podcast. If you're going to have one takeaway for everyone just to think about moving forwards, or one thing that you're interested in or that people should keep track of over the next couple of years with regards to healthy fats, what are you thinking?
Where are the big trends going to be? So unfortunately, I'm not aware of a big randomized controlled trial that's going to settle this heart health debate. Okay. And that's a problem, because it means that people are going to keep this argument up, and I don't know how that ends. So my one take home message is, I don't know how this story ends or if it ever ends. So keep your eye on that space. It might still be like crazy online. It might get worse. Who knows? I think that's going to be interesting, because I don't know that we've got the resources to get the new data to answer that question. Where I think we're going to see some advances is in the context of mental health and maybe cognition. I think we're going to have better trials. I think that, I'm a bit of a reductionist in the sense we study DHA in the context of brain health. I think some people are starting to say, hey, what if we eat a good diet, have people exercise a little bit more, maybe eat a little more plants, and do a few things and try and hit the mental health or the cognition with that kind of thing. Scientifically, it's a little uncomfortable, right? Because we're going to say, well, how do you know it wasn't just the fish oil, or how do you know it wasn't just the exercise? But the practical people have a good point, and the clinicians have a point. It's like, we need solutions. Let's get something to stick, and then you guys can go be reductionists afterwards and tell us how it works. But let's get things that work. So I think we're going to see trials reporting in the next few years that are using these multiple arm approaches for the brain. And I think that'll be really exciting to see if that works and how well it works.